Well, welcome back to another exciting episode of 42nd Street Pete's Grindhouse. I can still say Grindhouse. Fuck whatever's going on here. I was going over, trying to think of actors that were still draws on 42nd Street and in the movies for a while. And, in the 60s, a lot of guys like, Eastwood, Van Cleef, Bronson, Jack Elam, Arthur Kennedy, Robert Ryan, all went over to Italy to make spaghetti westerns. Well, one major actor didn't. He stayed in the U.S. and made some pretty cool westerns too. And he was a draw in 42nd Street because most of us grew up watching some of his movies on TV, like Brute Force, Birdman of Alcatraz, and Veracruz, and that guy was Burt Lancaster. And Burt did a bunch of stuff. Like I said, the mid-60s guys were heading over to Italy. Burt stayed and did a film called The Professionals in 1966, co-starring Lee Marvin, Robert Ryan, and Woody Strode. And it was about a bunch of adventurers hired to go down to Mexico and rescue a wife from an evil Mexican bandit played to the hilt by Jack Palance. Well, it was a good action film, and Burt clashed with two of his co-stars for a couple of reasons. One, Lee was drinking a lot and pissed Burt off sometimes. And the other thing was, no matter what Burt did, he could not best Woody Strode in any test of strength. So that was 1966. In 1968, Burt starred in The Scalp Hunters with Ossie Davis, who he had met during a civil rights protest, because Burt was a big supporter of civil rights and marched in a couple marches. So the premise of this one was, Burt's a trapper who has a bunch of furs and gets waylaid by Indians who take his furs and leave him in replacement for the furs with this escaped educated slave played by Ossie Davis. So Burt doesn't want a slave. Burt wants to get his furs back, but the Indians are attacked by a band of scalp hunters led by none other than Telly Savalas and Shelley Winters. And somehow Ossie Davis gets captured by them and plays it up to the hilt, playing to Shelley Winters as, he can be her servant, this and that and the other thing. The dialogue between Burt and Ossie is great because Burt, shoots off these clip sentences like, don't think, you're not supposed to think, I'll do the thinking here, stuff like that. So it all ends up as basically Ossie and Burt get into this huge brawl in a riverbank and fall in the river. While they're fighting, the Indians come in and take out all the scalp hunters except for Shelley Winters. When the fight stops, they find they are surrounded by the Indians who are pretty much laughing at them, and the Indians go off with the scalp hunters' wagon, the furs, and Shelley Winters. And Burt decides that he's going to go after them, followed by Ossie Davis, and that's how that one ends. Lawman 1971 I had covered. That was the Michael Winter film where basically Burt is this lawman who has to go in and arrest this patriarch of a ranch because of a killing in another town during a cattle drive. And when Burt refuses to take the payoff for the rancher, some violence ensues. And like I said, I've already covered this with a Michael Winter episode, so there's no point in rehashing that. You can go back and look at that. Valdez is Coming, 1971. Burt is playing a Mexican sheriff who was dealing with an evil rancher played by John Cryer in his first film. John spelled Jon, not the comedy guy. And basically he is tricked into luring this black man out of hiding where he gets shot and leaves his pregnant Indian widow. Well, Burt, being a righteous guy, thinks there should be some repayment because he was used to lure the guy out and it was bullshit because it was the wrong guy. Well, of course, the rancher refuses to pay him off and basically crucifies him and leaves him in the desert to wander with a cross on. Eventually, he gets loose, and you see Valdez was a cavalry scout, and he loads up his shotgun, his Sharps buffalo rifle, and his pistol, and goes hunting and blows away a bunch of El Segundo's men and tells them to tell El Segundo that Valdez is coming, and he kidnaps El Segundo's wife and holds her until he gets the $500. It's a righteous movie, and again, it plays to the civil rights type thing, which Burt was fond of. Last on that list is 1972's Yulzana's Raid, directed by Robert Aldrich, and co-starring John Davidson and Richard Jekyll. Yulzana had jumped reservation and is out with a bunch of braves and is plundering the countryside, killing and raping in graphic detail. When one woman is being led out by one soldier and her son, they are set upon by the Apaches. She screams, "Don't leave me." He turns around and shoots her through the head so she wouldn't be raped. He's taking off with the kid, and they shoot his horse, and he basically commits suicide because he doesn't want to be tortured, and he is diced up by the Indians who throw his entrails around. Another rancher, played by Carl Swenson, is captured, tortured, and is found with a fire in his crotch, disemboweled, and his dog's tail stuck in his mouth. It gets more brutal and violent as they're trying to they find another rancher's wife alive, and she was left alive because basically she's going to be the bait that's going to get all the troopers killed. And it pretty much happens because they divide their forces, and Burt and Richard Jekyll's people are under attack and are basically blown away because the Indians want the horses, while Davidson's troops are distracted and late coming in. Yolzana is killed by the other Apache scout, which is apropos. Burt is basically dying and left under a wagon because they know they can't move him. So all of these were pretty cool, violent westerns, and in comparison to spaghetti westerns, they held up just as well. And like I said, Burt was a draw back in the 40s and 50s, but was still a huge draw in the 60s and 70s. And, you know, his movies sold. So there's another guy who would you associate with mainstream films who basically did a lot of grindhouse films, films that did wind up in the grindhouse who would be considered grindhouse westerns and things like that. Another note on Valdez's coming, that was Frank Silvera's final film. Frank, unfortunately, was electrocuted putting in a garbage disposal. And Frank would play Mexicans and Italians, but his real heritage was that he was Jamaican and also taught acting. So that's our show for today. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm going to be checking out a really weird, obscure film this week, which I will get to later on this week. Probably people haven't seen it, and I don't think it's even available on demand or anything else. So I'm not going to give you the title of the film because I have to revisit it and just see how fucked up it is. So until next time, thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. 42nd Street Pete.net if you want to purchase any Grindhouse Resurrection magazines, my books or whatever. And again, my thanks to Fusebox.com for helping me put this website together, actually putting it together for me. And you should check out their shows because I'm on a couple of them and I'll be involved with them, looks like for a while down the road. So until next time, stay safe. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll catch you on the flip side.